Yeah, I think we're like, just going back to what you were saying before, we feel like enjoyment is a state you have to go out and get,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like mental health. You think mental health, you have to go out and get it, right? You have to learn something, or you have to implement something, or you have to be in a certain activity, or you have to have certain things not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can find enjoyment, or you can find mental health, whatever. We don't see it's the default.
Yeah, yeah, we really don't, and it's such a pity because it's something we're looking for. It's like it's already there, you know, and like there's like it's completely free. Like there's no thought required, there's no effort required, there's no posture required, and it's like how cool is that? But how I don't know. There's something wrong with the fact that that's not more obvious.
Yeah, it's because it's too simple.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I always think this with, you know, with my business head on. We were kind of talking about it a little bit before we hit record, but we don't appreciate what we get for free a lot of the time.
Mm.
Like, just generally,
Yeah,
we don't appreciate what we get for free, and we get enjoyment for free.
I
And
know.
it's under our noses, and it's so available. It's like one thought away, right?
Yeah,
Always, no matter what it's weird to think, so counterintuitive, that no matter what we're doing, no matter what circumstance we're in, no matter what people we're with or not with, whether it's light, day, middle of a storm, whatever, that enjoyment is one thought away, always.
yeah,
Always.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Gosh, that is mind-blowing.
it is.
And then, so in your mind then, so we kind of have it set up that the keys to enjoyment are: find the things you like to do and do more of them, right? That's like traditionally self-help world,
Yeah,
right? Find the things you like to do, find the people you like to hang out with, find the one person you like to hang out with, and do more of it, and then you'll have a happier life.
yeah.
And so if that's not the recipe for navigating life and having, if that's not the keys to enjoyment, how do we navigate our lives if we're not guided by that?
Guided by looking for enjoyment.
By looking outside of ourselves for things to enjoy and spend more time doing. Like, how do we know what to do? If, like, for me, when I bumped into this conversation, every single aspect of my life from the age of about 20 was about, well, where's my next candy floss fix coming from? And so
Yeah,
everything was navigated by that.
yeah,
And so when you see the fallacy of that, the illusion of that, the well, we don't need to find a job we enjoy. We don't need to find a partner that we enjoy spending time with more than another. We don't
yeah,
need to make our kids behave so that we enjoy our dinner more.
yeah,
That seems so weird, but
yeah.
it's true.
It is.
And
Yeah.
it's like, well, then what motivates behavior if it's not human seeking pleasure, you know?
Well, I do, but and I know this is a question that a lot of people have, but there's logic and motivation in every different state. So if you're in a state of suffering, your motivation is to get out of that state of suffering, and your logic for that getting out of it depends on what you think caused the suffering and where, right, which is what you're talking about. But what people don't realize, because they're not used to it, is when we're in a more a natural, easy, undistracted, unencumbered feeling, we still have motivation. We just have motivation from there. Right? And in my mind, it's a clearer motivation that's more connected to what makes sense to us rather than what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah. Yeah. Give us an example. Give an example of that.
Well, I think an example of that would be, you know, when I lived and worked in Lacona for about 10 years, and Leela and I went there together, and we would regularly have the conversation like, are we living here forever, or are we like going home at some point, or are we going somewhere else at some point? And we would typically have that conversation from a state of insecurity where we didn't want to make the wrong choice. Right. And what we found was when we were insecure and we didn't want to make the wrong choice, every conversation was a waste of time. Because we knew what we needed to decide, but we had no clarity to know what the heck we were trying to do. And then we would always conclude with, well, why don't we just see when we feel better, why don't we see what makes sense? So a couple of days later, we'd be like, so about where we live, what do you think? And she's like, well, it feels quite good here. I'm like, yeah, me too. Anyway.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting was we just one day it felt like, yeah, I think I would like to, it started to dawn on me, I'd really like to see what it would be like to run my own company where it didn't matter if I messed it up and it failed, rather than running someone else's company, right? And it wasn't like I'm unhappy doing that. And it wasn't like I'll be happier doing that. It just, it was a thought that had some energy and intrigue to me. And it kind of bubbled on my mind a bit. And I wasn't desperate, like, oh, I need to do that. Like if someone said you can't ever do that, it wouldn't have infringed on my happiness at all. But it was something that I felt, you know, quite drawn to do. And then at some point it was like, yeah, let's do it. And it just,
there's a neutrality. When you describe it that way, there's a neutrality in that, and there's a common sense in that.
Yeah.
Oh, like I wonder what it would be like to blah blah blah.
Yeah. And what was really interesting and what I see in people is when they're content, the thoughts that make sense to them are much more connected to them and what makes sense to them or what's meaningful to them, you know? Like you'll notice that when people are content, I think they're more naturally themselves, and as a result they're more connected to the things that matter to them, you know. So like I used to be part of this leadership training for the army, and the other people that ran it with me used to do this exercise where they would read out like 16 things and they'd have to put them in order of what's most important to them. And inevitably, the three things that were most important to them, they spent the least time on, right? And then, why is that? Well, I knew why that was. It's like when you're not in a clear mind, you're out of touch with what's important to you. So you don't, that is a given.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I used to think that, like when I bumped into this conversation and I heard the words love and contentment, I was like, oh yeah, I'm all for the love bit. Contentment, ugh. It's like horrible. A dirty word to me. Because, but if you're content, then if you are content, that implies no candy floss to me. And so I was not interested. And I thought, unless you were dissatisfied in some way, nothing would ever change. And I liked change because I thought fresh, new, exciting was the candy.
Yes.
So don't give me content, because then I'd just going to stay. I'd stay in this job, in this marriage, in this family, in this house forever. I couldn't imagine anything more beige and bland, right? There's no candy floss to be found there. And so I would constantly conjure up feelings of dissatisfaction in order to move from that feeling of dissatisfaction out of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Crazy. Like I'd create my own mental problems in order to solve them.
Yeah.
To give my busy mind something to do, essentially. Like, how nuts is that?
Yeah. No, but it's a great illustration, Nicola, about how it's crazy outside of that logic, but inside it makes perfect sense. And so the only thing you have is, do you have any perspective on your level of clarity or not? Because if you don't, then it all makes perfect sense, because you have no external measure.
Yeah. So if you know, like if you get a sense of just even that, like I wasn't even, it sounds so crazy, but like I wasn't even aware of when I'm off and when I'm on. I
Mm.
wasn't aware of when I'm content,
Mm-hmm.
when I basically wasn't thinking about anything. And when I was dissatisfied, I didn't even notice the difference. So
Yeah.
I'd have thinking, I'd go, oh, I think I'll make a cup of tea in a place where I'm content or whatever. Or I think I'll go and have an ice cream, or I keep thinking about ice cream. I think I might have to have an ice cream today, but, or I'd be caught up and thinking from a place of dissatisfaction, and I'd treat both,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
both content of thinking equally validly,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
with equal, like no discernment at
Mm.
all, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever state of mind I'm in, whatever I think is true.
Yes.
And
Right.
and so, like you say, like if you have no understanding of how the system works, right, which is basically, I love the way you describe it as like when we're in a low state of mind, we've got predictably distorted thinking.
Mm.
There's no clarity in there.
Mm.
It has a weird twisted internal logic of its own, so it says, oh no, this is definitely right. That's one of the hallmarks of it, but it's totally untrustworthy. And just, if you can even get slight eyes for that, like the feeling lets you know whether your thinking is to be trusted or not.
Yeah.
And I used to think that if I get but I don't like the job that I'm doing. I want to change my career. I don't want to wait till I'm content, because if I'm content, then I won't change. But I don't like it. It's like such twisted
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah. It is.
And then I'd find myself content, and it would look like my job wasn't a problem at all. True, it would look like there wasn't a problem at all, because I'd only created a problem through crappy thinking.
Yeah.
And so when I was content, there was no problem. And I'd enjoy the work that I was doing in that moment. And then I'd get caught up in thinking again, and I'd go, yeah, but you've really got to change this. It's really boring. There's not enough candy floss anymore. You need to change so you can get some more candy floss. And look, at last time you got all content, you didn't change your job. So you really need to do it from this space. Like, again, that internal twisted logic. But I notice I'm not still doing the same job. We get moved.
Mm.
I didn't know that.
Mm.
No, movement happens in contentment as well as in security.
Yeah,
You don't need to worry about the fact that if I'm content, nothing changes.
Yeah.
Because you know, like if you're caught up and you're in a relationship that looks terrible to you, the fear that if I calm down and then act, I won't act, and I need to, because this relationship's not good for me. If you don't know that no movement still happens in a state of contentment, like a knowing to leave, or a knowing to stay, or a knowing to have this conversation or seek that help or whatever, then you've got to keep riling yourself up in order to create movement in your life, if you think movement is what's required.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But from a space of contentment, enjoyment, we feel like if I enjoyed my life, I'd never change any of it.
Yeah.
But we don't see that the nature of life is changed. The nature of life is to thrive and grow and develop and expand. And that's unstoppable no matter what your state of mind.
Yeah.
And so then we're trapped. If we don't know that, I was trapped in a cycle of continually creating, like literally creating thought storms in order to move, because I wanted to move all the time, because that's where candy floss came from.
Yeah. 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 No, totally. It really is that way. It really is that way. And people don't know that, you know, the less perturbed you are, just the better your mind works in all areas, you know, and so that includes motivation and inspiration and ideas and problem solving, all of that. I just don't know that.
Yeah, that, like, because I didn't know about steak, going back to this metaphor, but like a little bit of steak goes a long way, right? Because it's so nutritious, and it's so, I know, not if you're like not into meat and all that kind of stuff, right? But in this example, like there's so much nutrition per tiny little centimeter of steak. Mm-hmm. It powers a lot.
Yeah.
Versus a whole 10 bags of candy floss.
Yeah.
And so the richness, the nutrition, the solidness, the reliability, the richness, the value of steak is like a tiny bit of that goes a very long way.
Yeah.
And that will, like, if you imagine the difference of one thing or the other on your body, and again, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you're going to argue with me a lot, but hopefully you get the point that I'm making, is like, I know which one I would rather be powered off.
Mm.
And so to me, when I was saying at the beginning, like, I had a different definition of what enjoyment is.
Yeah.
Like, for me, enjoyment was the high and the buzz and the rush. And now to me, enjoyment is it's really hard to describe, because you're never thinking about your experience when it's present.
Mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if we kind of think about it now, to me, there's a richness and a lightness, and it just, and I'm in life, not thinking about life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about how I'm doing, or what I could be doing, or I might think I'm enjoying that train of thought.
Yeah.
But I've just fallen into candy floss mode most of the time.
Yeah.
True enjoyment for me is when all that thought falls away, like you say, like our natural default shines through, and I'm actually with the person that I'm with, or I'm present to the task that I'm doing, or I'm connected to the environment that I'm in, like I'm seeing the world that I'm walking around in.
Yeah.
Like in this moment.
Yeah.
And then into that space comes more lightness and more laughter and more joy and lightheartedness and carefreeness, and all the seriousness falls away, and you're just left enjoying life as it is in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of spending time enjoying and thinking about this, is how I used to spend that. My best, if you like 5 years ago, if you'd asked me, like, what's your favorite thing to be doing, it would be, oh, do you know what I really enjoy doing? I enjoy sitting with my journal and imagining, creating visions of how cool my life could be. That would be hands down, right? You know, that thing, like, if everyone went out and no one could see you, what would you like to spend the evening doing?
Yeah.
Form of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Creating ideas of how much more enjoyable my life would be in the future. And I notice now, journaling has fallen out of my repertoire of behaviors. and I now have a journal that I haven't written in yet. And it's like, that's not how I'm engaged in life and enjoying life, rather than thinking about how to enjoy life.
Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah.
It's really nice. And I was listening to you, Nicola. I realized that having some understanding that enjoyment is an experience of an unburdened mind. Enjoyment is an experience of a free mind or undistracted mind. It was a big jump to really consider, oh, enjoyment is something you can count on. It's not something you look for. It's something you know is already there, and but for your own thinking and your own focus on your own thinking, there's nothing to stop you having a good time, enjoying what you're doing. So then I'd hear people say, well, you know, my wife wants to go to her family, but I don't want to do that. And I'm thinking, why not? What difference does it make to you? I mean, you can enjoy going there, or you can enjoy staying home, or you can enjoy going in. But it's like, as soon as you decide, oh no, you can't have it there, then you go with all that thinking, and then you don't enjoy it, and then you say, yeah, I knew it. But it's so freeing to really consider, oh yeah, no, enjoyment's a given. You can take it anywhere. It doesn't mean you'll always have it, but it's always there. There's no reason you can't just fall into it anywhere. Like, oh, at the school meeting, or one of the ones that really interested me is that I have admin anxiety. You know,
Right.
I have lots of piles of papers that I don't like to look at, like to think about, and And I had like lots of times where I've had to sort them out for my taxes, which is like the admin anxiety plus the taxes anxiety. And like I would think about how I needed to do it and I don't want to do it. And I would have chronic anxious stress about this task. But the part that fascinated me is whenever I sat down to do it, it wasn't but 10 seconds before I was, actually, it's just quite fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're sitting there and all you're doing is putting papers into different piles, but actually it's really nice.
I love the possibility of that, right? So like I have things. So like I want to go and speak at Viva in Spain.
Yeah.
Right, later this year. And for some reason speaking has fallen away as something that's scary.
Yeah.
Which is very cool, right?
Nice, yeah.
So the speaking bit, not worrying me at all, right? But the thought of getting to the airport, hiring a car and driving on the wrong side of the road, which I've never done, the idea of that is like your admin anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I don't think I can go then. Or I need to figure out, I've emailed them and said, oh, how do I get there if I'm not driving? And they're like, oh, you can get a taxi. I'm like, fine, okay, whatever. So I'll do that then. But it's like to sit with the knowing that I think I will definitely be nervous and unable to do that drive, and know that really consider the fact that it's not what I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all that's required. Just considering that fact is, and I might see something new about it, I might not. Right. But like, luckily I don't really care either way, which is probably the best setup you can have for an insight. Right. But I don't really mind it either way, but I have an openness, a curiosity. It's like, it's open on the back burner. Right. Like if public speaking cannot be scary. Like, really? No, really? Like if that can change, and that was, and motorways and going out of my own house, like if the worst things I can imagine can shift and are not the experiences I thought they would be, there is no reason that this one thing should be an exception. So then I get to smile and sit back and see, you know, what do I get to see about that? I think. But just to your point that you were saying before, I used to think that, you know, and you were saying like how natural enjoyment is, like it's there, it's the default. For me, one of the thing that threw me out of thought and back into life again, I think, was I had thought that having a nicer life, aka enjoying my life, came from thinking about myself all the time. I thought I had to monitor myself. I thought I had to keep an eye on myself. I thought I had to keep thinking about the principles and applying them. I think I didn't realize until suddenly it became visible to me that I was keeping an eye on myself all the time.
Yeah.
And then I realized when it suddenly became visible to me, right? It was like invisible thoughts suddenly splattered in front of oh my God, I think I have to think about how I'm doing and what's going on inside my mind and what my thinking's up to 24/7. I don't have to do that. And as that all fell away, like invisible thought becomes visible, you're like, why would I do that? And it dissolves. That's when I got my life back. Like in that insight, in that seeing. And I realized that ironically, the very thing I thought I'd been going to get was at the other end of all the figuring it out and all the monitoring and all the surveillance was there the minute I stopped surveilling.
Yeah. That's a great example. It's a really good example. And I think it does a lot for people, whether you're enjoying yourself or not, to know that that's the underlying inevitable or default, as you said. I think it does a lot for people to realize, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not enjoying myself, but it's not like it's anything profound has to happen for me to enjoy myself.
That is so cool, actually. God, imagine if you actually had to change your husband, change your job, change what country you lived in. You actually, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. But you know, it's funny in our house, Nicola, that when people are least satisfied, there's the most intense discussion about what we should do.
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks that doing what they want to do is going to make them feel better. But when everybody feels good, everyone's pretty much happy to do whatever.
Yeah. So true. So true. Doesn't mean you don't do anything. It's just, it
Yeah.
matters what you
Yeah.
get up to, right?
And we enjoy it too. There's no fighting.
Yeah. 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 Very cool. Well, I look forward to continuing this conversation as we talk more about the keys to enjoyment next time around as well.